Hello, thriller enthusiasts. Have you ever wondered how your favorite heart-pounding novels are crafted? Today, I'm diving into the secretive world of thriller writers, from the shadowy minds behind spy thrillers to the masters of psychological suspense. Spy novels aren't just about suave agents and sleek gadgets. They're woven with intricate plots, where every detail is a clue. What's the secret to keeping millions on the edge of their seats? Is it the extensive research, or perhaps a past life as a spy? Switching gears, let's talk psychological thrillers. These stories grip your mind, playing tricks and leading you down dark, twisted paths. How do writers construct these complex psychological mazes? And more intriguingly, what inspires them to delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche? Then there's the adrenaline-pumping world of military and police procedurals. These aren't just stories, they're operations, showcasing meticulous strategy and real-world tactics. How do authors achieve such authenticity? Do they train with the military, or is it all from the safety of their writing desks? In this series, we sit down with the minds behind these thrilling tales. They'll share their secrets, the challenges they face, and how they keep us coming back for more, book after book. So buckle up, it's going to be a thrilling ride. Stay tuned as we decode the masterful art of thriller writing. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications on our latest interviews. You won't want to miss this. Hello, thriller enthusiasts. Have you ever wondered how your...
Okay, here we go. This
Okay.
is Echoes of the Inner Sanctums. Today, the topic is thriller writers, and our guest today is Kely Mcclung. Did I say it right?
You did.
He's a Scotsman. Okay. Kely has got two new thrillers out. You want to give us the titles, Kely?
Sure. I have a total of 3 books out. They're all kind of thrillers. One is a little more sci-fi called Loop, and the one that I've pushed the most, which is, more the military, James Bond, Jason Bourne, Taken type of story, is Black Fire. And then I have a
Right. Let me
story I
put that
just
one.
released.
Here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
And I just, I was real happy. I joined. It's been 10 months, so it's not like I'm killing it, but I crossed over 1 million page reads this morning, so on Kindle Unlimited. So feel good about that. Another milestone. It means at least a few people have read it. On Goodreads, I think I have about 6,000 ratings and another couple thousand now from Kindle, so feel pretty good.
Okay. Let me put your other book up here. Hold on. And we got the Super Ninja book, right?
Yeah, sounds silly, but it's actually a pretty hardcore speculative sci-fi action story. Certainly nothing like a Marvel book or anything like that, or a story. It's not really for kids, but it has a really interesting history, which is why I went ahead and made it. And working on part 2 now. Super Ninja.
I think you're kind of like me. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, just briefly on the martial arts, and then your foray into film.
Well, I started with martial arts as a very young child and was pretty much obsessed with it. And I did the tournament scene when I was very young and did very well. And later I got into the kickboxing back when it was just burgeoning pro karate, the PKA and WKA. And the thing of it is there were so many champions because there were, every weight class, and you had a couple of different divisions fighting over dominance for the sport. And seemed like every time I turned around, there was another world champion. And I had a few fights. I did okay, nothing great, but I was obsessed with working with police and army, and got a chance to do that. Got a chance to work with SWAT teams, and later on the Federal Justice Department through one of my instructors, and a lot of police, and later with the army. I actually got to teach the some of the army in Malaysia, an exchange with the Minister of Culture at that time. And so, spent a little time in Kuala Lumpur and time in Thailand, and then later was competing. I had the bug to compete again. I had spent years. I got to train with Danny Nosanto and some of his inner sanctum, Tim Tackett and Larry Hartzell, and some of the hardcore original Bruce Lee guys. And later, like I said,
what do you think
that
about Bruce?
Well,
What do you think?
a tremendous athlete. Very obviously. I mean, I never met him, but obviously, very, very charismatic, and obviously a very, very intelligent guy. And he applied it and his obsession to martial art. And when you have an intellect and a drive and a athletic body that you're gonna push to the absolute limits, I mean, you're gonna be pretty successful. And most people don't realize that Bruce had done, I think, as many as 18 movies before he was 18 years old. So people know him from the Kung Fu movies, but he was a child actor.
Well, it's like Jackie Chan was with that Chinese, was a theater group, but they did gymnastics and athletics. That's why in his movies he's always using furniture and props and everything for his fighting scenes.
Sure. I mean, I've always said before, if I was working with somebody who was a top dancer, a Baryshnikov, or, it doesn't even have to be that level, but, an athlete that can control their body, it would not be that hard to adapt and teach them how to be a serious badass.
Yeah.
If you have control of your body, so it's attribute training.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got into doing martial arts full time and got into filmmaking?
Well, I mean, I was a martial artist since I was, 3, 4, 5 years old, and then and obsessed all through junior high and high school, and but I was in my early 30s when I won the world title for full contact stick fighting. So there were 3 divisions and people from all over the world, and I was normally around 190 pounds, but the cutoff was 165, and I had a student who I wanted to compete who was a natural 220-pound guy. So I was like, I don't want to have to fight my own student. So I went down to 162 pounds and won the middleweight championship. And that introduced me to some people. And eventually they sent a guy out who's a very famous karate guy, Mike Stone. And they sent Mike Stone around the world to find the next quote unquote Van Damme. From what I understand, Van Damme, the success of his first couple movies were so good that, he was trying to renegotiate his contracts. He pretty well got screwed over on his original contracts and was trying to break those and had a great case. And they were like, screw you, we'll just find the next guy. And the next guy they picked was me. So
it could be you.
And it was, but then the guy in charge of those projects, for whatever reason, it's like one of the only times in my entire life I met somebody and on the handshake, he decided he hated me. So it wasn't going to work out. And then Mike Stone said, hey, I really think you've got something, and I'll take you to South Africa to do the American Ninja movies. And so I jumped into American Ninja #4, ended up playing the main martial art bad guy. And then I got to double Michael Dudikoff, and I doubled David Bradley a little bit, and I got to choreograph a lot of fights. And I played, you can wear a mask, so I got to play 20 of the different ninjas, and I played the main bad guy as well, which was a character named Super Ninja. And the story that I wrote has absolutely nothing to do with that. And I've let people know if they're trying to follow the movies, they're going to be disappointed. But I was later able to write a screenplay that Menachem Golan with Canon Pictures signed me for 3 movies as a star and to direct my final picture, which would have been Super Ninja. And then Mcclung at that time was going bankrupt. I had no idea, but the company was folding, and he went back to Israel.
Can you name some of the films they did? I know that name, but I can't
Oh my
remember
God!
what the films
Mcclung Golan was Canon Picture, Golan Globus. So every Chuck Norris movie, and from Delta Force to whatever. I mean, the Charles Bronson movies, the original Van Damme movies. Mcclung Golan was an absolute legend. A real character in Hollywood and known around the world. But he had his hands and produced something like 400 films, and maybe a little bit more. And
did you ever take acting lessons?
Yes, I did. I ended up going to LA, and I was doing what everybody does. You're in those days, you're reading drama log, and you're calling everybody, who, hey, what movie can I audition for or whatever. And I got to do a lot of a few fights and stunts, and got to work with some of the never the A-list guys, but some of the secondary guys. And then eventually, when I met face to face with Mcclung, he signed me, as I said, to do 3 pictures. But then the one was falling apart as fast as we were doing it, because I didn't realize his company was folding, and so I kind of got left out on that. But even by the time I finished my first film, I started writing, and so good or bad, I've written, not that they're all produced or anything, but I've written a total of 31 feature films. So I produced 3 of them myself, and I script doctored and did a few others that got made in Hollywood. And so I've always had that writing bug. And of course, when the pandemic, I had a big film.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you start writing back in high school and in your 20s at all?
I did. I actually hated my English teacher, so I loved my history teacher, my physiology, my chemistry, everybody else. But for whatever reason, I really I didn't get along. So because of that, and I think about it sometimes, because of that, I didn't do theater, and I didn't, I was a fanatical reader. I read, my very first book was, I read Tarzan of the Apes, which Edgar Rice Burroughs, which is, like a 275 page book or something. And I read that when I was 4 years old. And
did you read Conan too?
I read everything.
Conan the Barbarian.
I did.
I know I did.
I pretty much, and not just fantasy and not just science fiction. I read everything. I was a fanatic about biographies. It didn't matter who it was. I just wanted to know about them. I was a real history buff. And so, I was just a fanatical reader. And then, of course, I did read, thrillers. One of my favorite in those days was a book called Shibumi by an author named Trevanian. And that book stayed with me a long time. I read The Shogun. I read all those, when I was quite young. And so in my late 20s, early 30s, I started on a book. And, I had nobody to kind of say, hey, go, go, go. And, I'm not using that as an excuse, but I was in the middle of it, probably 250, 300 pages in, a spy thriller that I did a lot of research on, how the Vietnam War was partially financed by drug trade, that the United States helped run. But when film happened, when I got that opportunity to go to South Africa and do the American Ninja movies, I put that on hold. And by the time I got back, even I didn't know what the heck it was about.
Do you think that, screenwriting is different than writing a novel? You agree with that, right?
I definitely do.
when I taught my creative writing class, what I taught them to do was first try to make it a screenplay for a chapter and then go back
Sure.
in and convert it to a novel. Because when you first start writing, you overwrite and overwrite too much. There's
Right.
too much tell, not show, And
Right.
one of the best things I did is you probably had done it too. You have two characters, they enter an elevator. You can describe the lobby for one sentence, and then everything that happens is dialogue between the two people in the elevator. And by the time people have read those 4 or 5 pages, they know something about the characters just through dialogue. And I see a lot of beginning writers just don't use enough dialogue at all. It's just way too much talking heads and exposition. So how did you
Well, as a
how did you
screenwriter,
learn to write a
um, well, honestly, I mean, I was thrown a few scripts, early on when I was in LA and asked to fix them. I was brash and basically said, "Hey, I can do better than this," and they were like, "Well, okay, do it. You step up and do it." And and I did, and I was kind of known for fixing dialogue and certainly action. But I even like Super Ninja probably, the part one, I mean, I probably have 50, 60 pages and there's probably 10 lines in there, because I
Yeah.
am telling the story. It is, I agree that you use dialogue to express character, but you have I think sometimes people talk too much. And even on film, it's like, hey, let's get on with it. And what screenwriting helped teach me, I hope, is to be very economical in my words,
Right.
because in a screenplay, you've got to squeeze a lot onto the page. There's a lot that happens. And that basically these days is about 100 to 110 pages is a feature screenplay. That used to be quite a bit longer, but that's kind of the standard now, even shorter, 80, 85, 90 pages. And
Really? Wow.
theoretically, a page represents a minute of screen time. Theoretically, whether it's dialogue and or action or just action, it still kind of comes out the same. But to make the stories as big as possible, I had to really learn how to get the maximum amount of information and the smallest amount of words on the page. So even though I write maybe 100,000 word novel, Black Fire's, I think 131,000. It's still told in a very, very economical style.
Right. Well, I think
If I
one of the most famous ones was Rosemary's Baby. Polanski said the book was a screenplay. It was written that tight and that short. And of course,
right,
Ira Levine used to be a playwright, so it made sense that he could make his novels
right,
very tight, concise, and short. And he said, all I had to do was look at the book. I didn't hardly even need a screenplay except for the actors. Now, I have a
right,
question. Let's say you got a 120-page screenplay. You've got a little bit of
yeah.
set direction and et cetera, setting, day after, whatever. But when they go to shoot, it can turn into a longer scene, right? Depending on what the director wants to do with it.
It can, but it's what happens on quote unquote real movies, not independent, station wagon type films. There's so much that has gone into it that there's so many people who have already contributed. It still will come out more or less. This is going to be about a minute. It's amazingly accurate. It's it's not a diehard rule, but it does more or less come out that way. And by the time you've had the difference in screenplay is it's really a collaboration. Even if you wrote every word, even if you were the director who wrote every word, you're still going to have somebody else most likely filming it. You're going to have actors in front of it. They're going to be interpreting the words. You're going to have a sound guy who, even the way he records, is going to interpret what is on the page. You're going to have a composer who's going to interpret what he's seen by music. You're going to manipulate with sound. And then with the edit, I mean, you can have, 3 or 4 shots and you rearrange them and it has a totally different meaning. And, writing
like,
almost the same way.
Watch network TV anymore because the streaming, Netflix and Prime Video, they make these series. Like I just started rewatching True Detective, and the cinematography, the little clips he puts in between the actors speaking, like just their hand reaching for something or the reflection on a mirror or something like that. Just the production quality is so much better. Funny story. I remember. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I love True Detective, especially I thought the first season was the strongest. But it's there again. You've got 2 amazing actors who are producing. Also, they're also the producers, so they have an incredible amount of say. But those 2 guys, McConaughey and Harrelson, how much experience are they bringing to the table?
Oh yeah, and from a writing standpoint,
actors, everything. So fantastic.
I mean, I told my students, you put 2 diametrically opposed characters in a scene, the scene will pretty much write itself. Just let the characters do what they want to do, and they did that a great. Even though they're both Texas boys, they were just my wife was great. She said, "Are all detectives really drunks and assholes and shattered human beings?" I said, "No, it just adds drama to the movies, honey. Most of them just, they're used to it,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shattered guys, though. I think so. It's a tough job.
I mean,
you couldn't. I have so many friends
who
are police officers.
As a federal agent, I didn't work homicide or anything like that. It was all white collar and mainly Secret Service protection type stuff. Although I have some, I put it in my books because truth is funnier and stranger than anything you could ever make up. But I have a funny story for you. I think what got me into writing was I was like you. I read a lot of history, tons of nonfiction. I read all the classics and everything. But when I retired, I started reading Dean Koontz, and his book Seize the Night really got me, and it's kind of sad. They've never really made a quality movie out of one of his films, but Stephen King's movies were crap too. Salem's Lot on TV and stuff. But when Goldman took over those screenplays with Misery and Shabchak and Hearts in Atlantis, they were just wonderful. But Dean Koontz does a funny story, and you'd get this from editors. When he first went in, they said he had 4 or 5 books on the bestseller list, but all with different pen names because some crazy editor said, "Well, this is sci-fi, this is horror, this is psychological. You got to use a different pen name." So when he got his first $350,000 back in royalties, he bought all the rights back to his book and put Dean Koontz on the cover. But one of them said, "Well, for your next book, we want more horror. You're getting away from horror." So he wrote Phantoms. It was that movie with Ben Affleck in it and Peter O'Toole. And he said and they let him do the screenplay for it, which he loved, But he said about 2:00 in the morning, his phone rang and it was Peter O'Toole. And he goes, "Dean, I might call you that. There's a line I'd like to change. And I think we should go like this." And he said, "Sir Peter O'Toole, whatever you want to do." And he said, he woke up his wife and said, "Peter O'Toole's asking me if I can read a line this way." We should be that lucky, right?
Well, that's the thing is, even a director, you stop and think about a director who's done a lot of movies. I mean, whoever, he's probably at a stage he's hiring actors who have done a lot of movies. And if a director's done a lot of films, he's probably done 10. That actor might have done 100 roles and been on 100 sets with 100 different directors and all the situations and all the things that brings. So the experience that these guys bring in is just absolutely tremendous. And then, you know, as a writer, it is quite different. You know, even as a filmmaker, even if I'm making a small film festival kind of movie, which you know I have and done very well on the festival circuit. But I mean, even if it's just your girlfriend or your wife or your lover or whatever it is, you're sharing that experience sitting on a couch or sitting in a theater or, you know, talking about it the next day at work or in the coffee shop. And with a book, you know, you write it and, you know, 6,000, you know, Black Fire right now. So with 1 million page reads, that means at least 2,000 people have read the book. I have 6,000 ratings on Goodreads, so that's 8,000. And out of that, I have 300 ratings and, you know, 200 reviews.
Yeah.
So 200. So out of 8,000 people, the only little feedback I get, you know, and you don't ever get that one-on-one, which is so, you know, yeah, I miss that. You know, I do miss that, you know.
And then you get some jerks on there that go, "This is the worst book I ever read." You know, just makes you want to just say, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Well, what you really want to say is you want to slap them upside the head, and then you want to say, "Hey, read my other book if you want to see something bad." No.
Yeah. Well, I learned really
that's
on.
Bad. I can go. I can do bad. I can
what
do
helped
worse
me
than
is
that.
I joined a. Yeah, I can make it really worse. I joined a local critique group, which really helped me a lot. They were about 60% traditionally published writers, you know. And man, I remember the first time I read, I was writing kind of a horror police procedural thing, you know, and everybody was really quiet. And this one guy, he writes westerns, but he was a good writer. He said, "Richard, when did you write that?" I said, "I don't know, about 4 months ago." And he goes, "Gee, I thought maybe it was in 1880 or, you know, something like that." He said, "Well, who are you trying to write like?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, Lovecraft, Poe." He says, "They're all dead, Richard. You're not going to sell that." You know?
Right.
But you learn the hard way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a distinct voice in my writing. I mean, I can read things that I wrote when I was 18, 19 years old, so 40 years ago, and I can still tell it's my work. You know, and probably the biggest common denominator is just intensity. You know, I write intense action, intense emotion. Just, you know, the book is not, I love those stories that just kind of tell the story. And I'm like, God, that's so great. You know, it's interesting and nothing really happened. That's fantastic. And my story, I'm like, you know, maybe I don't have the confidence. I have to like, you know, it's packed, you know, it might be 400 pages, but it's packed 400 pages.
Well, what I liked about it, I just skimmed your books a little bit, but I'm sorry, what's the name of the thriller? The first one?
Black Fire.
Yeah, Black Fire. I like the way you fleshed out the character because you see so many of these. I mean, Jack Reacher sells, you know, Reacher sells 1 million books, but you don't really know anything about Jack Reacher. You know, he's just kind of, he's like James Bond. He's a blunt force that just goes in, kicks ass, takes names, and then, you know, worries about his
well, there's obviously lessons to learn from those books. I mean, with the success, I mean, there is that train of thought or that idea that you write to the reader, you know, you write to your audience. But, you know, I have a story to tell and I'm just going to tell the story. And then, you know, it's a struggle, but, you know, you'll write more or less from the heart. That sounds corny, but then, you know, the audience, there is an audience. I mean, we're all human. So, you know, we do have a common human experience. And if you are honest with, you know, your own fears and frailties and triumphs, and you can get that on the page, there are other people who are either striving for that or have experienced something similar because they're human also, you know? And
do you think that's why anti-heroes are so much popular now?
well, again, that partially goes with our times, I guess. It's like if you
Mhm.
follow media and film, especially on TV,
Oh,
you think about the rise of all the movies that came out of the war that were not necessarily
right.
propaganda, but they certainly had a point of view that they wanted to get across. And
Mhm.
you look at, what's been happening in the world for the last few years, and we're going through that again, where people
Mhm.
are happy to embrace
You
the
know,
dark side, they embrace fantasy, to
right.
embrace.
It's not really like you said in the 50s, you had noir thrillers were all
Right,
dark, brooding, psychological, and anti-heroes. The main character was a drunk. He was an ex-cop. He had a friend on the police force that helped him out a little bit, but there was some dark secret in his past, like Chinatown, for example.
right. Sure. Great,
Chinatown.
fantastic movie. Great movie,
Yeah,
great writing.
yeah. I don't know about Nicholson though. To me, he's a great actor, but he's always playing Jack Nicholson.
It's
He
yeah,
can't
he's
be
he's
like
yeah,
he's kind of like Frank
again,
Sinatra.
but Jack Nicholson has certainly done some fantastic comedy, and um
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
and of course part of that the comedy comes from the from his persona that we know as Jack Nicholson, and we're expecting him to be
Yeah.
that tough gruff guy, and then when he has that little moment, it is funny because it's coming from Jack Nicholson, but he's
Oh
a
yeah.
unbelievable actor, I mean, but you're right,
Oh, I read that.
he is always Jack Nicholson, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading that he and Warren Beatty were roommates when they first went to Hollywood, and somebody else too, and they all thought he's never going to make it. He's just not going to ever make it, and he surpassed all of them. Isn't that amazing?
Well, that's pretty much the way with all those guys, and what's interesting is almost all those
Yeah.
people um, worked for Roger Corman, who was the king of the B
Oh
movies,
yeah.
and
I mean, he could do a movie
including
in a week. It's
right,
amazing.
right, which he was famous for. But
Yeah.
even that legacy, even Menachem Golan's first couple films, Menachem was with Roger Corman. I think he was a grip on a couple films that were shot in Italy, a couple car racing movies or something. But
Yeah.
he parlayed that and ended up owning Canon Pictures and taking that
Sure.
to be a $1 billion company at one time. And
Well, I
just
can't
I'm
think
thrilled that I
Coppola
got a
and
chance to work with him.
Spielberg.
William
I think Coppola
Shatner
and
and
Scorsese.
Scorsese. I think all
Yeah.
those guys they all had that Roger Corman beginning. So probably
Yeah.
started
They
more than
always
that
pick on
guys
poor
than anybody.
Shatner. But I loved
Yeah,
him on Boston Legal. He was hilarious, intelligent, and
he,
I mean, they wrote the part for him, but it was fantastic.
but there again, that's a great illustration of how great was the writing,
Oh
on that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
show.
Don't
And
you think most people really don't? I think writers we still get the short end of the stick. They don't. They watch a movie and they say, "Oh, the
no,
acting was great, the directing was great," but Hitchcock said, "Give me a good script. If I don't have that, I can't make a good movie."
right. And I mean, it's very true. I mean, the actor can make up for a lot, and the director, but good writing. But Tarantino's a great example. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you look at some of the actors, even at that time, certainly wasn't on the top was John Travolta. You look at David
No, he
Carradine.
brought him back.
You look at Sonny Shiba. You look at some of these guys. So what is the difference? And suddenly they have this amazing performance, and the difference is fantastic writing
Mhm.
and a fantastic director, somebody who pushes buttons and pulls and pushes, but
Yeah.
gives the actor, all the things he needs. And suddenly these people who have done 20, 30, 50, 100 movies, sometimes even more, and have never had such a great role and
Right.
have never been able to shine, suddenly are in a situation where you're like, oh my God, that guy's amazing. Well, he's partially amazing because of the writing. And, you know, in Tarantino's case, he's writing his own stuff. So, you know, he's the writer and director. And,
well, you know, he brought back,
you know,
he brought back Kurt Russell, and he gave
Kurt Russell's one of the greatest actors ever. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
but I mean, he wasn't really
right. He wasn't on top
in a movie.
Right. I mean, you go back, my favorite movie, you go back to Chinatown. So, you know, Townsend did, or Robert Towne did a movie called Tequila. He also wrote Tequila Sunrise that had Michelle Pfeiffer, Mel Gibson, and Kurt Russell. And I mean, there's a couple of scenes with Kurt Russell that, I mean, he should have been nominated for those scenes. They were unbelievable. I mean, the acting on them was just really incredible. But again, fantastic writing.
Yeah. You know who else I like from that? He was on Justified. Walt Goggins, is it Walter Goggins?
Okay.
He was in
I know
The Hateful Eight, and Justified. He played the Marshal's old childhood friend, who was also the local crime boss, and he just that little old golly.
And of course that movie had
kill me.
and of course that movie had Tequila Sunrise also had the great Raul Julia, who was
he was great.
And he got to eat it up in that movie. He got to just go, you know, man, they just turned him loose. It was just fantastic. But the concept, so there again, back to the writing.
It's funny. I read
the concept is great.
I read Frank Langella, the actor, you know him from Dracula and everything. And he's a little strange because, well, I'm just going to say it. This guy was telling you out before, there was an ex-NYPD detective. And, you know, like LAPD, rich people want to have a off-duty cop in their guest house. And this guy was at Langella's guest house. And Frank comes walking in to the little security room, naked except for a bathrobe, sits down, sprays his bathrobe, and, you know, letting all his glory shine out. And but after reading this book, I think it was called Name Dropping by Langella, I think he was bi, because he did Dracula on Broadway before the movie, and then Raul Julia took over, and he just went on for 3 pages about how great and what a handsome, marvelous guy this guy was. I said, I think he was in love with him.
Well, but anyway, you know, he was an amazing actor.
But if Frank Langella wanted to make a pass, all that behind the scenes. Hey, let me show this clip from. I have a clip here from John Wick movie. Okay, and they interspliced it with actual Aikido throws and stuff, you know, in between. And let me just show that and have you comment on that a little bit, because you actually did choreograph fights for films, right? Okay, here we go.
Some pretty good stuff.
Yeah. Now that wasn't strictly Aikido, though, was it?
Yeah, pretty much was Aikido, but you know, again, it's a film, so
Right.
you know the angles certainly make it better. But you know, and it's not that certain martial arts work better on film than others.
Right.
You know, those are big, gross motions that you know the camera, the audience can follow and figure out what's happening. You
Right.
know,
Right.
you
And usually you don't have a gun in your other hand.
which you know, from what I understand, I mean, I've certainly not at that level, but you know, from what I understand, you know, Keanu Reeves really works hard. I don't know about his martial art, but he really works hard on you know, his gunplay. And
Oh
he,
yeah,
you
I've
know,
seen
he
those videos.
competes.
Yeah.
He does really well.
Right. Yeah.
And you can tell, I mean, in real life, he would not have made the guy go through a big circle and then finally shot him. He would have intercepted and shot him. But that's not going to look great on
Yeah,
camera.
exactly.
It's going to go so fast that you're not, you're like, whatever, you know. So, you know, you've got to exaggerate your body mechanics. The camera's got to work in the dynamics. And, you know, they've gotten better at filming fight scenes as they get better. Like, you know, the martial art that, you know, I did so many, but eventually, you know, you try to find an anchor, and the anchor for me was the Filipino martial arts with Kely, which again I was picking up a lot with Danny Nosanto and a lot of his instructors, and even you know my one of my main instructors was one of the premier knife men of the world, Leo Gahi, you know, Tuhan Leo Gahi with Piketty Tertia, and he's considered the knife guru maybe of the world, and
Who's
you
the
know if
other?
you
Is it
go ahead.
John Woo that's famous for choreographing martial arts fights and movies?
I don't know about his choreography, but he certainly gave a grace to the actors, even in their gunplay. You know,
Right.
John
Right.
Woo is really famous for, hey, they shot 10,000 rounds in a movie or something
Right.
incredible. You know, the scene that, hey, 1,200 rounds got shot in one scene or something, and you know he was like
Is he the
Peck
first
and
guy
Paul. He was one of the
stunt?
first guys that. What's that?
Oh, I love Peck and Paul. I watched the
Well,
Wild
very
Bunch.
similar. Where if you think about Peckinpah, there were you know all this incredible violence, but it's being done in you know slow motion and with you know extreme close ups and
Right.
then extreme wide shots and you know this variety that keeps you engaged and a lot of slow motion. And then of course John Woo as a director did a lot of that as well. And you know I don't know what the actual parallels are with Peckinpah, but you know, thinking about it now, certainly John Woo is famous for all the slow motion
Right.
ballet type violence that he would put in a movie.
But he used a lot of
You
wire work, right? I mean, like that business of walking up the wall and doing a backflip. You know, I think like in Charlie's
know, that I don't
Angels,
know
he
how
did a
much.
lot of that.
Right. I mean, you know, it's I think about it, I haven't worked with enough great gun guys to know, but you know, we look at martial arts, we look at Chinese movies especially, and the guys jumping 20 feet in the air and spinning 5
Mhm.
times, and you're like, well, this is just absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, you
Yeah.
go back to an American Western and the guy flips a coin and shoots it 5 times. I don't think
Yeah.
that many people could do that too. So, you know, the
No.
movie needs that movie needs that exaggeration and we accepted it. So I imagine
Well, they've
that,
gotten better.
oh, well,
I'm not
yeah,
a
I mean, of
firearm
course.
expert, but I'm pretty well versed in firearms because of my
Right,
occupation. But
right.
I've noticed they've at least now had the main character have to reload his weapon. You know, in the old days, they just shot,
Right. You're like,
and I
how
would
many
sit and count the
100
rounds and go,
rounds?
"Hey, you're empty." Hello. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the other one I like is, you know, at a semi-auto, when it's empty, the slide comes back, right?
Right.
And they used to show these shootouts, and the guy's pressed against the wall, and he's got his gun up, and the
Obviously,
gunfight's still going on, but the slide's back.
Right.
Yeah, but
there's definitely an authenticity. Writing. It's interesting writing thrillers, especially if you're including military and
right.
Police procedural and some of the stuff. It definitely takes a lot of research, even if you are, quote unquote, an expert with guns. The fans that read those books are very unforgiving. They're like, hey, that gun has 16 rounds. It doesn't have 17, and they eject from this side. The slide only does this. There's no safety, and they're like, man, if you've made a mistake, it's like, man, I'm just trying to tell a story, But you definitely have to do your research. You have to do your research.
It was on Facebook yesterday, and there's a couple of groups that are Bond movies, right? And it was that famous scene where Bond has to turn in his Beretta, and they give him the Walther PPK,
Right.
And they're going, well, why did he have to do this? Why did that? And I had to write it. I said, because both of them don't have any stopping power. The Mossad used Berettas with 22s, but it was for and the Delta Force and Navy SEALs use them, but for one thing, they practice so many rounds. It's cheaper ammo. That they can shoot you in the eye or press it to your temple, But I had to say neither one of those had stopping power at all, I said, even a 9mm is not that great. If 40 caliber or 45 or 357 will take any day of the week, But I just laughed.
I have a guy I reach out to when I have a question who was on the teams. He's on the SEAL teams. And if I have a real question, I'll reach out to him. And, one thing he, like in my first and Black Fire, I have a lot of guns and a lot of fighting, a lot of guns, a lot of violence, a lot of people die. Let's just say that. And I would always say, he dropped the clip or he popped the clip or he did whatever. And man, my friend was all over me. He's like, man, a clip goes in your hair. And
it's a magazine.
A magazine. And I'm like, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't have the same rhythm. It just
I know.
He's like, I don't care. It's a clip, it's a magazine. So I eventually now, as I write, I just about can't force myself to put the word clip. I'm like it.
Yeah, no, mag sounds as good as clip. Yeah, I know. That's the first thing I always.
But you got guys from our day, that served in Vietnam and everything else, and they still say clip. So I'm like, it was kind of good enough for them. Sure. It's kind of good enough for me. And but
I know,
I try to do a lot of research.
Well, I love the research part of it. This last thriller I wrote, Predator: The Lead Affair, was loosely based on Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell,
Right.
And I did probably a year's research on that. And it was, usually don't outline a book, but this one, all the research I did, I mean, they were so off the wall and strange and egotists and perverts that all I did is put actual quotes in that they did and scenes they did, Ghislaine actually had a dinner party with, high rolling people. And at the end of the dinner, she went upstairs, brought down these scarves. First, she had all the women stand up, pull down their tops, expose their breasts, then put scarves on the men and have them walk around, touch the women, and try to decide which one was their wife. I mean, you can't make that kind of stuff up.
Well, it's kind of probably the theme of everything I've ever written is that people are worse than anything you can make up. And
I think so.
But I mean, you think you've written the most brutal, gruesome, horrible death or torture or whatever, and the next day you read about somebody who in real life who's done worse. And but you know, the
yeah,
thing that's you know, it's like a two-sided coin. So if one side of the coin is bigger, so is the other, and that means people are also better than anything you can imagine. And so that's why, you know, thrillers, I think, resonate with people, is because we want to know that there's a way to defeat evil, quote unquote evil, and that we want to, you know, the good guys will somehow
prevail.
persevere and
Right.
will
Yeah.
prevail somehow. And that's important, just for us to be able to, you know, get up in the morning and keep going. You know, if the world is, you know, imagine these places. I mean, I was in the Ukraine 3 years ago. I was in Kiev, and you know, war was going on then. You know, it was 100 kilometers away from, you know,
Right.
Kiev, from where I was. And you know, just imagine that's what you grow up in every day. And not that far
Oh,
removed,
sure.
Black Fire opens up in Chicago. I lived in Gary, Indiana for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And you know, Gary at one time was considered the murder capital of the world, you know, right up there with Compton and, you know, the slums in Brazil. I mean, in 2016,
Well, like now,
there were
everybody's talking about Palestinians, Israel, right? And I remember I
yeah,
was flying back to DC one time, and I ended up sitting next to this young man who was a Palestinian. Of course, I didn't tell him. I
that's right.
just said I was a journalist, you know.
Right.
And I said, "So why do you have this really driving hate for Israel and the Jews?" And he says, "Well, let me put it to you this way. It's fresh blood." He said, "You know, maybe you had a relative in your past that got killed in the Civil War or World War One or two or Korea
Right.
or Vietnam, but my uncle was killed by those goddamn Jews a month ago." So
Right.
it's like you said, it's part of the upbringing, the environment, and you know that's what I worry about now. Is even if they can wipe out all of Hamas, they just uh, radicalized
Yeah.
all those young men that survived. You know, it's
You,
just going to grow
you
right back up again.
you would think so. I don't know how you get around that.
Oh,
You know, back to film. I actually really like the movie The Kingdom,
mm-hmm.
Jamie Foxx, and but the ending was so powerful in that
Right.
movie. And you know, the ending is like, hey, you know, again, it's a terrorist action that happens, and the FBI is sent to deal with it. And you know, in the very end was, you know, hey, what did you say? What did you say to them? And he said, you know, we're going to kill them all. And then they cut to
Mm.
the, you know, the Arabs or whoever it was. I think it was Arab at the time. I know that everybody's different, but, and it was like, so what did you say? And it's like, yeah, we're going to kill them all, you know? And it's like, I don't know how you stop that cycle. I mean, obviously there's people much smarter than me who still have no answers either. I mean, there's thousands and maybe tens of thousands of people trying to figure all this stuff out, and some very bright people. My brother works for the NSA and was military intelligence before, and you know, he's one of those guys trying to solve problems. And who knows? I mean, he can't tell me anything except that that's his job, you know. And you know, there's a lot of
Well,
bright people trying to figure it out. And so, you know, we
yeah.
try to solve it, and we're like, hey, let's write a story and we'll save the day in our story. And you know, it's pretty brutal, and it's things work out. But
Hey, did you, as a writer, does this ever happen to you? There was a couple famous thriller books where they proposed a plot 20 years and then it happened later, actually. And well,
absolutely.
remember in the 3 Days of Condor, that was his job to read all the books and
Well,
give it to the
yeah.
special ops
Well,
department.
even in
But do you ever write
you know,
something and then days later or years later it happens to you or you see it?
well, you know, as crazy as my first book is, which is a sci-fi, it's not a
Mhm.
zombie book, but it's about it's really hardcore. But basically it's about a
Mhm.
virus that um AI designed
Mm.
a computer app. It wasn't a virus, it was a computer app that a social media app actually that people embraced, and it triggered hormonal and chemical changes in the brain, and not everybody reacts well. When you dig further into the research, everything from the head of my company is XAI, which turns out, 2 years later, that turns out to be Elon Musk's company. My book was written before, so but that the head of the AI organization, and but especially science fiction, of course, over the millions of years, or it has, I guess, not millions of years, but certainly for a long time. Jules Verne, of course, is famous. You can go back even much further, and of how close it hits and how things become reality. And we will have flying cars and maybe transporters eventually someday, and all that stuff. I mean, if you had written a smartphone, put that in a movie 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that would have been, oh my God, that's a fancy James Bond something, and you're like, or Star Trek.
And now all the screenwriters have to adapt.
And now every right now every 5-year-old kid and above has a smartphone, and it's so hey, that's just part. I wonder if the evolution will change. Will our I mean, you and I are older, but to think about multitasking, etc., the you want to learn how to do something, you ask a 5-year-old these days, and they'll
exactly
grab it and figure it out. And and evolutionary, will their thumbs change? Will their will the speed of their eyes and their brains, I mean, are they being changed? Are they,
I don't know.
Certainly beyond us or beyond me.
Well, my wife's been last year she was teaching a 6th grade class, and she wasn't getting any support as far as the technology. So she had the 6th graders do everything for her, and they just did it. Done. There, it's on the screen. There it is. There you go. What do you need to know?
Well,
I mean, gotta wrap this up, but one question I got though.
Yeah.
Steven Seagal.
Okay.
I was I could set it up for you. I went to a horror convention, and this actor, I think it's William Forsythe.
Okay.
He was in Boardwalk Empire. He was in he played the sheriff in that real horror movie with the
He's had a huge career.
Yeah. Anyway, he made one with Seagal where he played the drug lord. And I was just standing there talking. I said, "Would you ever make another movie with Steven?" And he went, "Fuck no." I said, he looked around. I said, "Why?" He just went, "It's fucking crazy."
I mean,
I'd have to agree.
Well, I mean, I never met him, but his first film was fantastic, Above the Law. It actually was. It introduced something new. It was a new kind of motion and style. His character was very, very cool. And somehow he became, ate up his press. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the man. So, he's done some good work. I mean, I don't know.
Well, he's a Russian medals from Putin, for Christ's sakes. I mean, what's crazy?
I mean,
I remember I heard Kurt Russell tell a story. There was that movie about where the hijackers had taken over the plane, and they sent Delta Force in.
Kurt Russell was in it.
Yeah, but remember they built
executive action or something.
They built like a kind of an air tunnel to the bottom of the plane, and they were supposed to climb up into the plane. And Steven Seagal's character was leading the Delta Force. Well, Kurt Russell said the morning he was shooting, they're all getting ready, everything. And Seagal turns to everybody and says, "I'm in charge. I've got the most experience here. You all take orders from me." And Kurt said, the fuck is he talking about? I've been making movies since I was 5 years old. I'm in charge.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Kurt Russell's phenomenal. You know, when I saw that movie, what I remember thinking about it was, I am a big Kurt Russell fan. I mean, wow, you look at Tombstone or you know, these kind of movies. I mean, he's phenomenal. But I remember watching that and seeing Steven Seagal play a comparatively minor role. And I was like, wow, the guy finally gets it, man. He's going to have a huge career by stepping backwards, not
right.
You know, being a part of an A-list movie and working with people like Kurt Russell. I'm like, wow, this is great. And of course, you know, it was a one-off because he never did it again, which is a shame.
The worst thing he did that well, he was supposed he's in the beginning of this, it was like a live action series with the Louisiana Parish, you know. In the beginning, he said he's been in law enforcement his whole career. Bullshit. He was like an honorary auxiliary policeman. And when you watch the show, he you know, they'd pull up on a scene, they'd all bail out and run, and then they would cut to him standing there. He couldn't even run to the scene, you know. I think the only good scene is one of the guys was having trouble qualifying, and he took him to the range, and he does know how to handle a weapon really well. I'll give him that.
I imagine.
But I mean, he couldn't
you know,
even
again, you know, I don't know the guy, but he, you know, he's done a hell of a lot more than I have. So I give him credit for that.
Oh yeah, I know my wife. That first movie you said, she got a big crush on him with his little ponytail and everything. Yeah. All right.
Well, you know, that movie had Sharon Stone in it. That was a great movie.
That's true. Then he did one with was it Kely LeBrock, the one that was in
right.
Women in Red, Gene Wilder. They got married, didn't they? I think they did. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah,
well, anyway, we got to wrap this up. Where can everybody find your books? What's your website, etc.?
Well, I'm, you know, my name is William Kely Mcclung, so there is a website that I almost don't keep up with, so that's not the best place. But my books are just on Amazon. I'm self-published, and I have 3 novels out, working on sequels to all 3. And you know, Black Fire took place in South Africa partially, and I lived in South Africa for quite a while, you know, doing the films, and then it ends up in Kazakhstan. I spent a couple months in Kazakhstan. It's in Prague and Crete, and you know, I only write what I really know, and so the sequel takes places in places that I actually have to go to. You know, it's not Wikipedia; it's a real story. But everything can be found on Amazon under my name, Kely Mcclung. It's Kely with 1 L. And of course, I have a big Facebook, Instagram, Twitter presence, you know, partially from the film and all the different things I've been involved in. And so, you know, there's at least a few thousand people that follow me. And, you know, the thing about film is you need hundreds of people to help you out. Even the tiniest movie, there's still dozens of people who have helped you out in some capacity, and you pretty much need every one of those people. You know, a book, you pretty much have no excuse. It's you and a typewriter or a keyboard or maybe a piece of paper and a pencil, but you really don't have an excuse not to tell your story. And I have a good friend of mine who's a writer up in Chicago, Gary area, Ben Clement. And, you know, when I get stuck and like, wow, do I have too many words, or is this chapter too short, or do I have enough action or not enough action, or too much diet, whatever. And it always comes back down to tell the story, whatever it is, just tell the story. Don't worry about the other stuff. Tell the story. And I agonize over every word, and you know, I craft my sentences sentence by sentence. I agonize over it. I'm certainly not the fastest, and it should feel pretty much like you are watching a movie when you read my book. People will be like, hey, you know, wow, you jump from chapter to chapter and another character. And I'm like, have you watched a movie? It's every cut and second. I mean, are you kidding me?
Oh, I did forget.
You know, again, if you're trying to be Edgar Allan Poe, as you said, or H.G. Wells, then maybe then people are probably going, man, this style of writing is really fast. And
weird, yeah.
But these days, I think, and the response has been good. Meaning the books are, 5 stars, whatever. They're, I've had 5,000 5-star ratings. So, most people like it. Not everybody, but hey, not everybody likes Thai food, but I do.
Oh, one more last question. I forgot.
Yeah, of
Of
course.
modern
Anything.
thriller writers, who would you say is your favorite?
Wow. I mean, I still got to go back a little bit. I mean, I have read all the Jack Reacher. I have to say that. I
Oh, you go
loved
back as
the
far as you
original.
want.
I mean, I
I
loved
like Mickey Spillane.
right. I loved, I mean, I really like that story Shibumi by Trevanian. I think it's a great story. And I guess it's over the top or whatever, but I guess all books are. I don't know, but it was a fantastic, epic kind of story with a fantastic character, and some hints of martial art and sex and travel, and things that we don't really know about the average person. And I thought it was a great book at the time. I loved the Bourne series. I liked Ludlum a lot. I haven't been as thrilled with the Ludlum pseudonyms, or the people that took over, the ghostwriters and
Right.
stuff. But Jack Reacher, there's definitely something to learn there. I don't know that I've
Yeah.
learned anything from it, but I read them and I say, the audience is so incredibly huge here. There's definitely something to learn, and hopefully someday I'm smart enough to learn it.
Well, it's like two of my favorites are Preston and Childs with the Pendergrass series.
Very strong,
When they
very strong.
first started, they were really writing horror and sci-fi. But
Right.
then I read that, like
Right.
Kuntz kind of said, the market for horror kind of dropped out after Whitley Strieber and in the 70s, early 80s there. So
Right.
now they're really writing, they label the books thriller, but there's a
Right.
real element of the occult and the dark and horror underlying all of their plots, but they
Absolutely.
had to relabel themselves as thriller writers, So, well,
Well,
anyway, hey,
I like the Harlan Coben and these guys. I think are really great. I mean, John Grisham. All these guys. These are some strong stories. Of course, McCormick and those guys have read all of his stuff, and he's an
oh
interesting,
yeah,
hard to read guy, but really clever. I do read a lot of screenplays.
yeah.
And some of the guys, you look at James Cameron or something, you read Avatar, find the screenplay, and you read it, and you're like, wow,
Right.
no wonder this is a movie. I mean, what an incredible writer. So, it's a combination, I guess, but there's certainly a lot of great things out there and a lot of good people, but hopefully someday people will think I'm one of them.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, Mr. McClung.
Oh, thank you, man.
If you'd like to be interviewed on Echoes of the Inner Sanctums, whether you're a horror, thriller, sci-fi, or fantasy, but it's got to be, please, no romance. I just can't do romance. I'm sorry, ladies. Okay. And you can find my books on Amazon too. My current is Predator, The Lolita Affair, and I also have one called The Vonage Project, Nephilim Rising, and I had a bestseller called Solomon's Key, The CODIS Project, which is also still there. That one I kind of wrote on Dan Brown's coattails, but it was great. I got a film option first, and then I got an agent. It was just marvelous. Wish it would happen again. Anyway, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.
Thanks.